being here. This is very exciting to celebrate the great work of so many amazing people. I am Alana Rusnak. I am the publisher of Blank Spaces magazine, the owner of Chicken House Press, and this is the fourth time that I get to run this event, and it is so fun to see the faces behind the voices of the stories. So on July 1st, the contest opened asking for submissions from Canadians of short fiction under 3,000 words written to the theme of sticks and stones. The contest was open until the end of September, at which point I read every entry myself and selected a long list of 20, which was then sent on to the jury. So I want to say a big thanks to Anne Baldo and Gary Kirchner. Gary is here, I think, if you want to give a wave. I don't think Anne is with us tonight, but both were finalists in last year's contest and they served as jurors. And then we have Michelle McLaughlin, Joanna Morrison, and Sorcy Patterson, all three of whom serve as editors and proofreaders for Blank Spaces magazine. So all 5 of these volunteers, they were given those 20 stories that I selected for the long list, and they worked through them, assigning a grade out of 10 based on their own rubric. So those scores were then added up to determine the top 8, and those are the stories that we're celebrating tonight. The 8 stories were then sent to Yvonne Pelletier for the grand prize selection, and she is here. I did let her in, so she's in the room. We're okay. You're going to get to meet her in a little bit, and we'll all learn her top choice together. And that writer will be receiving a cash prize of over $300. So again, I want to say a big congratulations to all the finalists, and I am so thrilled that you could all be with us tonight. So I've invited each of you to share a brief excerpt of your work, of your winning story. Please keep it under that 5-minute mark because we do want to respect everyone's time. We're just going to dive right into that right away, and we're going to start with Nikki. Nikki, you're still okay? Nikki has a special guest.
I'm gonna keep her here with me because every time I set her down, she just screams. So hopefully she doesn't pterodactyl screech. I have a 4-month-old, so
that's wonderful. Nikki is a writer of genre-bending fiction, a science communicator, and an informal educator from the heavily forested lands of Treaty 8 territory. Now living in the Pacific Northwest, she tries her best to impersonate a sea sponge by enjoying a simple life while soaking up all the knowledge and experiences that float her way. Unlike a sponge, she's a gifted storyteller and has performed her work for spoken word audiences, science slam events, and scientific conferences across North America. She is a collector of hobbies and often enjoys mixing watercolors, cuddling her Liam Berger, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and obsessing over her plants. Nikki will be reading an excerpt from her story, The Scavenger's Garden.
Thanks, Alana. A surge of panic washed over me as I followed Ronnie over the threshold and gave my arms one more vigorous scrub with my palms. Mother was a hawk and could spot the telltale signs of chain link gawking from a mile away. I was already maxed out on the chore chart. What consequence could she bestow on me this time? I mimicked Ronnie's composure as Mom asked, "Did you trade for bread?" Ronnie plopped 2 loaves on the counter and Mom eyed her. "This only cost 2 credits today." 38 credits remaining, I added, not wanting her to mistake my silence for guilt. Mom's eyebrows quickly disappeared under her wispy bangs. "Larson must be in a good mood. I heard his daughter is partnering with the Wickers boy. That will make a nice union." She barely looked at either of us as she turned back to her food preparation. "Wash up. Breakfast will be ready soon." Relief accompanied a rush of breath from my lungs, and Ronnie shot me an annoyed look. Did she hear that? "Oh, girls," Mom quipped as we started down the hallway. "Gawking at the gardens will get us all in trouble. Do better." Ronnie's eyes rolled in my direction, and she held a finger to her lips to keep me from laughing. But I didn't feel jolly. The heat was rising in my face, and I silently reprimanded myself for giving in to desire. But my guilt quickly turned into frustration. We entered the bathroom, and I mumbled, "Why can't we all have gardens?" Ronnie sighed and swiftly pushed the door closed. "Because we're stonemasons," as she squirted a bit of soap in my hands, "not farmers." She began massaging her hands together. Well, they aren't farmers either. I angrily rubbed at my hand, feeling the soap slip and slide between my palms as I thought of all the well-washed women jovially tending the gardens in their giant, obnoxious hats. It's never sunny enough here for a hat that size. I could be twice the gardener they are, and I'd share. I'd spat at the mirror. Ronnie huffed at me, and we washed in silence, taking turns at the basin. My sister moved around me like I was hot steam that could burn her. I grabbed the hand towel from my stone basket. Well, it was less a basket and more a pot with a drainage hole in the bottom. 2 months ago, I began my 15th trip around the sun, and with it came the expectation to contribute to the stonemason economy. You slowly work through different styles of stonemasonry until you uncover your strength. And I'll tell you one thing, for me, it's not stone pots. We dragged ourselves back to the kitchen where my parents were already nestled at the table. My mom gestured wildly with a pot of berry jam while regaling my dad with a story of the custom pineapple ornament she'd chiseled for a client. She was the best chisel worker in Rockland. And that resulted in even more custom requests. Ronnie and I joined the table without a word and helped ourselves. My dad must have traded at work today because sitting in an ornate stone bowl was a neat pile of tiny tomatoes. Their deep red skins looked about to burst. I reached for one and popped it between my lips. The first bite was a surprise, juice gushing into every crevice of my mouth. My eyes closed involuntarily and my mind became quiet until I heard, "Guess where the girls were today?" My eyes sprang open and I could see that my father already knew the answer, disapproval deep in the lines of his face. I gulped, but his gaze bored deep into Ronnie. She was 2 years my senior and should know better than to let her little sister gawk at the gardens. I tried to think of something to say, but he had already launched into a mini sermon. "Listen, girls, you all know that we..." My mind began to wander as my tongue worked a tomato seed from my teeth. Then it struck me. Carefully, I grabbed my small cloth napkin, and under the cover of wiping my mouth, I dropped the seed into the woven fabric. My dad was now lecturing my sister about her duty as the older sibling, my mother nodding along with a grave expression on her face. I eyed the tomatoes again and quickly stuffed the food on my plate into my mouth. I paused to grab a few more tomatoes, shoving another in my mouth and two into the cloth napkin. With deft fingers, I folded it into my pocket. Done. Can I go outside now?" My dad stopped talking, a blank look on his face as he tried to remember where he was in his speech and simultaneously process what I just asked him. My mom nodded that I could go. I hustled through the quiet streets of Rockland. Breakfast was a typical resting point each day as everyone gathered with their families. With the empty street and my favorite shortcuts, I was out of the community and halfway to Woodland before you could ask, "Where did Libby say she was going?"
Thank you. It's great, Nikki. Next, we have Rose Camara. Rose is an emerging writer living on the Lekwungen People's Territory, Victoria. Her work explores women's health, resilience, and agency. She's had pieces shortlisted in contests by Room Magazine and Flash Fiction Magazine. Other than writing, Rose spends her time chauffeuring her children and transporting books to and from the library. Rose will be reading an excerpt from her story and three more.
All right, so we're going to be joining Phoebe in a quest through her mind, all while sitting on her therapist's couch. She scaled slabs of slimy rock, using both hands to hoist herself from one to the next, past campus parties, study nights, and the bathroom stall where she'd hidden from roommates to release torrents of tears, a phase she'd fully explored. She hiked on. She passed her old gym, where she'd worked out day after day to chase more reps, more weight, more hours, grimacing through every injury, every heartache, pushing to be faster, stronger, until she blew her knee out and had to quit competitive swimming for good, needing her parents to taxi her around. She had never been weaker, more panicked. 3 deep, calming breaths. The rubble became hard-packed snow, and the air sharpened as her childhood toboggan hill appeared. She conjured an ice axe and toe picks to prevent her sliding back. To her right, her father beat a vicious dog off a small child, a ferocity in his voice that shook her still. He had saved the kid's life. Phoebe was 8 at the time. She pressed on. Past the snow, Phoebe hesitated, knowing what was next. She hated water on her clothes, even metaphorically, but there was no other way through the water gathered in a pool in front of her. 3 deep, calming breaths, and 3 more. She wriggled her feet, planted firmly on the ground. Despite this pool, she was safe and dry, just trying to see the other side, see herself. She plunged one foot into the water and the other. The water lapped at her ankles. Then her knees, thighs, and hips. She shivered, but didn't stop. When her legs emerged again, her jeans were pasted on. She felt the water fall away from her body and relished the knowledge she could do hard things. A welcome mat appeared at her feet, brown and warm. Past it, the front door of the family home. The door opened, and the cave's damp funk was muted by brewing coffee and baked goods. A framed picture of Jackson stood next to an arrangement of white roses and daisies on the kitchen table. People milled about in black, carrying tissues and finger sandwiches. She stopped for him, to feel him. The brother she knew in her bones as his deputy in free-range adventures, and who she didn't know at all, because his spirit had been snuffed before he'd grown into his skin. A surge of love rocked her, and she wrote it until it passed. 3 deep, calming breaths. The house fell away. The cave tightened and darkened around Phoebe as it always did with unexplored terrain. The roof dripped incessantly. Droplets magnified the cobwebs she swiped away with her fingers. She was grateful for her light. It never gave out, even when she wanted to. The floor was littered with soggy stuffies, army figurines, and paper snowflakes. A wall calendar was turned to June, featuring a picture of a beautiful lake edged with willows. Branches dipped into the water, like toes safely tethered to their trunk. June 6 was circled in thick black ink. The calendar was unfamiliar, but the date was unforgettable. The darkness opened to a grassy hill. The roar of the river just over the rise made her chest heave. She covered her ears and stood motionless. She should have seen it coming. 3 deep, calming. She clenched her fists and strode over the hill. On the other side, a dark-haired child sat at the river's edge, amidst driftwood and river rock. She wore gray sweatpants paired with a gingham dress and black gumboots, the kid ready for anything. Almost anything.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Andrea Marcelino. I apologize if I'm saying your last name wrong. Andrea is an interdisciplinary artist born and based out of Toronto, whose practice includes writing, photography, video, and film. She earned her MFA at EICAR in Paris, France, and in 2019 was the recipient of a Canadian Council of the Arts grant and a Toronto Arts Council grant for a short film project currently in post-production. Her main artistic focus is to tell impactful stories with complex female characters and demonstrate the importance of female storytelling in our narrative and visual culture. Andrea will be reading an excerpt from her story, Slippery Silver.
Hi, and yes, you pronounced it correctly. It's Marcelino. Great job.
Wonderful.
I just want to apologize to everyone first because my talents do not lie in oration or just public reading. So, but this is good practice for me, so I'll try my best. Okay. There within her open hands lay the invitation, her name written in perfect cursive. Celeste, you are invited. The gathering would take place just after Christmas. The location was north of the city, where expanses of farmland had been converted into private property developments. An internet search revealed the satellite view of a very large house. It was never clear who among them was the host, as no one presented themselves as such, and so the host remained nebulous. No one questioned it further. The curated guest list brought together 20 individuals, sometimes more, sometimes less, of unique qualities and tastes. The address was always somewhere different. A labyrinthine cellar, a musky dance hall, a dressing chamber, and an abandoned theater. She turned the invitation over in her hand, felt the weight and quality of the paper, and delighted in the color of its text, silver. She had once written a little poem about the moon that was published in a biannual feminist literary magazine. And then one day, soon after, her first invitation addressed to the poet appeared in her mailbox, the elegant cursive in silver ink as if the moon herself had sent her approval. Celeste made a practice of preparing short verses to recite, no more than 20 lines. In the event someone would look around the room and ask, who can orate a poem from memory? And she could rise to the occasion and play to their ears, upholding her rightful place among them. Now, with invitation in hand, the flash of silver striking her pupils, she was struck by an eagerness she had not felt in some time, and a fear. What if they asked her questions? What did you do with all your time, Celeste? She was not a confident liar. The last gathering had been 3 years ago. She could not say they were friends. The mystery of their separate lives kept them hungry for these reunions, wherein they could be whatever version of themselves they preferred, authentic or otherwise. She sometimes wondered what the other guests were like in their respective homes. Were they meticulous cooks? Were they generous lovers? Did they ever melt under the weight of a warm blanket? It was a curious exercise attributing everyday mundanity to this group, because they seemed to exist outside of it, outside of dentist appointments and grocery lists and parking tickets, as if their real existences were extraterrestrial, beaming down to Earth for one night only to perform their best human. On the night of the gathering, it was snowing. The roads were terrible, and worse were the drivers juddering over the unplowed pavement. The for sign sale at the front gate and the absence of residential light confused the driver. Are you sure? He asked. The car cruised down the dark private drive, lit only by the light of the full moon, until they finally reached the large front door, flanked by 4 thick columns, like sentries guarding years of illicit secrets. Up close, a distant glow warmed the front windows, like light seen through the smudged glass door of an oven. She opened and walked through the unlocked door and followed the hum of voices. Didier was the first person she noticed in the front room. She almost didn't recognize him, his gaze blocked by a pair of large dark sunglasses and his striking ensemble too loud for a quiet corner. And yet there was a familiarity she registered, his distinct height, his impeccable posture, the elegant way he turned his head towards her when he sensed her eyes. He smiled at her and lifted his glass. I've decided to challenge every social norm and practice. It first started as an experiment, but grew into a much more fruitful and extensive life choice. Very postmodern of you. What have you experimented with? First, with personal hygiene. You live alone, right? Yes. Then he recited his list. None of them lasted very long, except for clothing, obviously. She studied his outfit, now given clear permission to fully take it in. A green army surplus field jacket worn over a scuba wetsuit, accessorized with a fur scarf wrapped tightly around his neck, and dark sunglasses. She smiled. Weren't you doing a PhD in the philosophy of technology? Right, machines having feelings. Reductively, sure. I've extended my research to any physical object created by humans, with a specialization in the tire. Clothing with feelings, then? I'm working with an energy worker. We find pieces that hold a lot of energy, sometimes reconstructing them to emit specific vibrational energy waves when you wear them. It's energy curation, essentially. So you're a stylist? I work in energy, not style, he retorted. So vintage clothing, but with crystals in the pockets? No, not like that, he said. This is much more powerful because you are wearing the energy on your skin. The organ absorbs it, and then you embody the energy. I see, she nodded. I'm currently wearing curation of different protection energies to avoid any contamination. He gave a sly, coy smile and arched a dyed orange eyebrow above the frame of his sunglasses. She smiled in delight. I wonder what you would suggest for me, she said playfully. He was silent for a moment, and then in a serious and considerate tone said, That would be difficult. Oh, I was just joking. She smiled apologetically, as if she had given a secret part of herself away. She felt Didier's stare beyond his shades and was suddenly conscious of her own outfit. She wore a simple long black dress that balanced comfort and formality. Her intention was to appear unassuming, so as not to invite any prolonged looks. Rather, she had hoped for sights she could feast on, and Didier did not disappoint. Yet his wordless stare made her question if her choice was in fact all that inconspicuous. Breaking the silence, she said, Well, If you do think of something, I'd be curious. She let her voice trail off and excused herself to refill her glass.
Thank you. Great job. Very good. Okay, Cornelia Mars is up next. Cornelia is a writer based north of Montreal. Her writing has been published in the Capra Review, The Keeping Room, and others, and is forthcoming in the Humber Literary Review. She holds a degree in English literature and creative writing from Concordia University, and she was selected for the Quebec Writers Federation's mentorship program in 2023. Cornelia will be reading an excerpt from her story, Sticks and Stones.
Hi, thank you so much, Alana.
You're welcome.
Hi. So I'm going to read a short excerpt from the middle of the story. So just to give you a bit of context, the story takes place in Sweden, and it's about a 7-year-old girl who's just started school and is trying to navigate life after her father's disappearance. At the end of my school day, I would cross the street to go to a home daycare with a lady named Anna-Lena, who lived in a low-rise with yellow stucco walls. This quiet neighborhood where I spent most of my time was only a 15-minute walk from where I lived. But my memories of that area, the glossy desks at school, monthly visits from the fluoride lady, and Anna-Lena with her oat cookies and bottles of perm solution, have a different hue than the ones I have of our home, which are still obscured by the rushing of long-distance trains and willful amnesia. I do have one memory of my two worlds intersecting, when one day Marcus, a boy in my class with a crew cut and flipped bangs like Dennis the Menace, confronted me in the hallway. "Hey, where's your dad?" he said, as if he'd given the question some thought and had to muster up the courage to ask it. I wanted to tell him that I'd like to know the answer to that myself, but I knew no one was going to give it to me. "How should I know?" I said, eyeballing him. But Marcus hesitated and looked around at the others who had gathered behind him. He was confused by my flippant answer, as if I didn't care, which is what I wanted him to think, and also by the fact that I didn't know. Even the kids with divorced parents knew where their dads were. There'd be some kind of gesture to go with the whereabouts of a dad. Something in the vein of how the balding weatherman on report announced a low pressure with possible showers, with a lifted arm, an index sweeping sideways, over there. Plus, everyone knew that dads came and went like clockwork, out at 6, back at 1600. That's how it was with his dad, Stefan's dad, and even Sophia's dad, and he wasn't Swedish any more than my dad was. Suddenly, I felt ashamed in a brand new way, all the way into the pit of my stomach. I couldn't even blush the way I'd normally do. Instead, I just turned cold. Maybe everybody noticed, because after that, no one bothered me about my dad again. Short.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, Elizabeth, you're up next. Elizabeth Nash is an Ottawa-based writer. Previous work has been published by CBC, The Globe and Mail, Nature, and Woman's World. She will be reading an excerpt from her story, Bones.
Great, thank you so much, Elena. The skeleton in my closet is loud tonight. She doesn't make it very easy to sleep. Her bones click, clank, clunk, porcelain white, grinding a few feet away from my bed. "Are you having trouble sleeping?" the skeleton asks. Her voice is muffled from behind the closet door. "Yes," I admit. "Good," she says. I am a little spiteful, so I've made my closet as uncomfortable as possible for her. Like geological strata, there are layers to the detritus. On the bottom are shoes, from "these will kill me" heels to heavy winter boots to Converse to flip-flops to work boots that Jackie once called badass. Old sports gear comes next, archaeological artifacts from younger years. Tennis rackets, a basketball, golf gloves, shin guards. Last was my stuff layer, a mishmash of shirts and board games and paperback novels I said I would read and never did. On top of it all, the skeleton lounged. What you thinking about? The skeleton asks now. Sleep, I say. My alarm clock on my bedside table screamed that it was past 3 in the morning. I had a lovely vision of throwing it out the window. I don't think you should sleep. Not surprising. I can surprise you. Please don't. I haven't always had a skeleton in my closet. She appeared the day I heard about Jackie. I opened my closet looking for a black dress, and there she was, eyeless and meatless and somehow staring right at me. Weeks later, and my scream is still caught in my throat, red hot and raw. I'm bored, the skeleton says. She raps on the inside of the closet door in a pattern. Tap, 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 tap. There's a lot of books in there. I don't want to read. Want to let me sleep? Not really. Milky streetlight filters in through the blinds. My bedroom is small and untidy. One bed, one dresser, one chair, and, notably, one closet. You should think about me, the skeleton says, just like she said yesterday and the day before that. I don't want to, I mumble. Her bones crunch and pop as she readjusts her position. You were quite mean to me, you know. Thanks for the reminder. I'm glad to be helpful. Jackie had been so withdrawn, canceling plans, not showing up, snapping at me, her friend from college. So I snapped back. I don't want to be friends anymore, I'd said, immediately regretting it, but it was like spreading salt over soil, some things you can't take back. Sticks and stones, the skeleton starts to sing, and I cut her off. I didn't call you any names, I say. Taking back a name hurts more, she says, and the name is friend. For the first time, the closet door creaks open. What are you doing? I catapult back against the headboard. Panic spikes through me. My lamp is on the bedside table. It's too far away to turn on. I am petrified, turned to stone as the closet door slowly swings outward. Streetlight catches a sliver of her as she slinks through the door and stands next to my bed. Hello, she says. I've never seen her outside of the closet. Vertebrae like razors, fingers like needles, her eye sockets are empty holes. She climbs onto the bed and crawls toward me. Why now? I manage to rasp. Of all the nights, why tonight? The skeleton looms over me, holding one of those needle fingers above my mouth, tracing a line over my lip, and I can see the future. She will stick the finger down my throat, gag me, choke me, open me up, slink inside, replace my bones with hers, calcify me from the inside out. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Next, we have Katrine. Is it Katrine or Katrine?
It's Katrine, yes.
Katrine Raymond lives in Hamilton, Ontario with her family and is currently completing a diploma in social services work. In her spare time, she enjoys hiking, knitting, and writing biographies for the Canadian Encyclopedia. Her plays have been staged in Alumni Theatre's New Ideas Festival, Hamilton Supercrawl, and Beamsville Lamplighter Festival, and the Toronto Fringe. She is the grateful recipient of an Ontario Arts Council grant in support of her nonfiction projects, Complicated Anatomies, which explores the friendship and fauxship between Dr. Emily Stowe and Dr. Jeannie Trout, the first licensed female doctors in Canada. Katrine will be reading an excerpt from her story, Keepsakes.
Awesome. Thank you, Alana. I just realized I finished my SSW diploma, so I probably should update my bio in any case. I'm going to be reading from my story, Keepsakes, which was inspired both by the Sticks and Stones theme as well as my grandma, who, after she died, who was blind in her last years, we'd learned that she had left a series of notes on things she had left behind, including the rocking chair that I did receive. And it was a bit of an incomplete story on that one because she'd written it underneath the rocking chair. And mine was the fourth name on the chair after my uncle, my brother, my aunt, and then me. And I never got to ask her what the story was behind the series of names there. But in any case, I will read away. Heart trouble ran through the Delaney's like a curse. Jim sat on his mom's blue-striped couch, pulled a shoebox from underneath, and wiped sweat from his nose. His heartbeat raced as he lifted the box. Jim had inherited his father's bad heart. He pulled off the shoebox lid. Hundreds of bottle caps. Mom didn't keep regular old lady stuff around. No Royal Dalton figurines or boxes of love letters tied with string. Instead, it was mostly junk. Rusty old bottle openers and coasters snatched from bars closed down decades ago. Sticks and stones, twos of things. She wasn't a pack rat, just old and tired and unsure what to do with life. Jim ran his hand through the bottle caps, enjoying the tinny sound. "Stop it," Evie said. "You're such a kid, Jimmy." She was 10 years older than him, and when she was a teenager, quick and cruel, she used to call him the mistake. Jim stood up and steadied himself. He took a few seconds to catch his breath. The air in the house was stale. For a while now, he'd been feeling these small but noticeable thumps in his heart as it wavered from its usual beat. Some days it felt like his heart was a small mammal writhing in his chest. When Evie had called a month ago, Jim wasn't surprised at the news. Mom had been saying that she should have died years ago, and she should have, but she'd outlived Dad and her priest. It was Evie's other piece of news that moved him out of his torpor. "We're meeting next month to go through Mom's stuff, and you're coming." Evie was the eldest, with her ordering people around and I told you so's, so Jim did whatever she said. But not this time. He wouldn't stop it. He sat down and started rattling the bottle caps harder. The clacking calmed him down, caps smooth and cool on his fingertips. There was so much junk in the house that the job would take days. Neither of them had been at the house for a while. Mom had been in and out of the hospital for months, and before that she'd invited herself to their places for Christmas and Easter, so they hadn't known what to expect. At first it seemed easy. Evie brought a box of green garbage bags and a plan to fill them fast. But then, as they began turning over chairs and rifling through the fridge, they began to notice the notes. Pinned on a hat. "I wore this on Easter in 1944, the year I met your father. The peonies are showy, and I knew it at the time. Only a young girl with dark hair and long lashes could pull this off. How ridiculous." And taped under an ottoman, "Cousin Enzo, the famous American weatherman, put his feet on this while visiting. I hadn't seen him in person since he was 5, and it was pouring rain that day. He was wearing striped socks. What unusually big feet." Even in the freezer, a strange chunk of cloudy ice. From the ice storm of 1986, power out for 3 days and temperatures down near 0 degrees. I had to burn books, sacrilege. Evie dumped the ice in the toilet to melt. "I know these notes," Jim said. Evie cocked an eyebrow. The last time Jim had visited Mom in the hospital, she'd been diagnosed with diverticulitis. She'd told him that her list was getting longer, and at first he didn't know what she meant. Diverticulitis? It sounded like an ill-gotten venereal disease, but everything else was wrong with her too. Over the years, her body had succumbed to all sorts of assaults, her sadness and fear turning to blood clots and food allergies. She developed lupus and celiac and diabetes and a long list of small, as of yet undiagnosed ailments, but not that those were any less real. "I felt like her gut was exploding," she said as her hand smoothed the thin hospital sheet. "It's just the swelling," Jim reassured her. "Nothing to worry about in itself." "This old horse will live forever," she said, and a part of him figured because she said it, it must be true. "Can you write me a note?" she asked him. Sure. At first he thought she wanted him to send her mail at the hospital, but she handed him a pen and a small notepad. She meant right now. "I need another note." Her eyesight was almost gone. She began to dictate. "From the dance at the church hall, that night I danced with your father to make Jimmy Reed jealous. At the end of the night, that handsome young man who became your father said I should phone him," and Jim was mystified, pinning it on old age. She asked him to stop there because his handwriting was too messy. "The nurse will finish it for me," she said. "She knows what comes next." And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Tara Ross is next. Tara is a writer, podcaster, and audiobook narrator based in Southern Ontario. She is Publisher's Way coordinator for the Eden Mills Writers Festival and co-hosts the Hope Prose podcast. Her fiction and essays have appeared in Tamarind, Dulcet, and Kaleidoscope, among others. When she's not working as a speech-language pathologist or being all things mom, Tara strives not to kill off wildlife with impossible odds of survival. Tara will be reading to us from her story, Hatchling.
Thank you, Alana. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome. So if you wanted some visual distractions from just looking at me reading off of my screen, this story was actually based off of an exercise I did with Emily Urquhart as part of the Writers' Festival. We used a visual image to help inspire a story. And so Supper Table by Mary Pratt, which some of you might be familiar with, the very famous artwork in Canada, was the inspiration behind this. So you are allowed to be distracted and look that up if you want something visual. So this is called Hatchling. Today, the first hatchling emerges from the gravel and dying maple leaves, a rough, moody pebble to match the overcast sky and heaviness of the coming season. Mason, always keen to avoid his high chair, spots it while retrieving a catnip-stuffed baby sock for Fuzzy. Truth be told, the cat should get the credit for this discovery, but rarely is credit given where it's deserved. "Mama, they're here!" Mason says, pushing a chubby finger into the hole of our screen door. I offer a "that's nice," while passing the relish to Gary. My half-hearted response only seems to spur Mason's enthusiasm. He yanks on the door, and Fuzzy hunches forward, ready to pounce. "Not yet, please. We are still eating," I say, curling my finger for his return. But now Cedric is under the table, army crawling toward his brother. My eldest, Nora, stands, her gaze pacing between me, her dad, and the back door, as if a traveling cosmetic mobile has appeared and not an abandoned baby turtle. "It'll still be there when we finish." Finish dinner, finish cleaning, and finish the talk. Gary and I have been avoiding this conversation for weeks, although we both agreed after my perilous drive home from work that tonight, before school starts back up, would be best. I look to him for support, but he stuffs half his hot dog into his mouth and shrugs. Cedric rises from his crawl and plants his face onto the screen. "What if it gets lost?" "It's a turtle. It will still be there after. It could go the wrong way." Nora presses into the table, much the same way I do when frustrated. "What if it goes on the road?" Gary holds up a finger while he swallows, then says, "Nobody needs to freak out." He chugs back his milk and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. He then rises, placing his glass an inch shy of his placemat, and walks to the front hall. The children follow him like baby ducks, while I watch a drip slide down the side of his glass. It will seep into the wood. It will leave another ring. "It's still supper time," I say to the empty chairs, shuffled to varying distances from the table. Cedric's milk is untouched. Mason's reward chips wait on his napkin, and my hot dog, the last one left on the serving tray, seems to ask why we are the only ones left. I pour Mason's chips onto my plate and fold his oil-stained napkin in half and then into quarters. When Gary returns, flip-flops on his feet, children in tow, his glass is in my hand, milk drip gone. Gary nudges Fuzzy back as the children escape into the backyard, and then he sighs toward the table. Maybe at the untouched hot dog, or the empty ketchup bottle, or maybe even the strain in my jaw. As I pick the crumbs, no one else seems to notice. "We can talk to them after dinner's cleaned up," he says. "Sure. Take a minute. I've got the kids." "Sure. Wouldn't want to lose a turtle," I almost add. The screen slaps shut, but the laughter and indifference streams through. Mason counting off each hatchling that claws into the light, Gary directing as the never-failing foreman of fun. No one is judging the mama turtle for leaving her babies behind. Nobody complains about whether they had enough snacks way down there in their hole. The mental fortitude of this turtle matriarch, who must also know her failings, is not even a passing thought. Maybe saving these tiny lives will dampen what is to come. And I will stop there.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, our final reader of the night is Kevin Wilson. Kevin is a Toronto area writer. His novel, An Idea About My Dead Uncle, won the inaugural Guernica Prize in 2018, and his novel, Call Me Stan, A Tragedy in Three Millennia, was longlisted for the 2022 Leacock Medal. His follow-up novel, Stand on Guard, a two-part invention, will be published by Guernica Editions in 2026, and his sci-fi noir Tendrils by Palimpsest Press in 2027. His work has appeared in various literary journals and the flash fiction anthology This Will Only Take a Minute. Kevin will be reading to us from his story, Ovomancy.
Thanks very much, Alana. This is what the egg tells me. Today, Marcel will go to lunch at a bistro near his office. He'll leave his desk and walk down the cream-colored corridor, noticing the scrape Brett's belt buckle made on the wall when Tess hammer-locked him into it after another unsubtle innuendo. He'll fleetingly miss Tess, who was relocated to another building after a confidential HR process. Brett, like Marcel, a lawyer, will still be there. Tess will not. ×2. Not a lawyer, not still there. Marcel's walk will take longer because of his foot. 2 weekends earlier, a half-buried shell at a lake north of the city will have sliced it mid-sole, requiring 3 stitches at a regional hospital. He'll be using the cane he bought when he sprained his knee 2 summers before that, when he figured out that a cane works better opposite the injured leg, not next to it. His cane will tick on the hardwood of the elevator lobby, its rubber foot cap having worn through along its edge. He will remind himself to stop at the drugstore on his way back for a replacement. The glass circle of the elevator button will light up at his touch with the whiteness of a soft-boiled egg. 2 blocks from his building, along the street frontage of a construction site, he will pass through a scaffolded sidewalk canopy of rough planks strung with light bulbs and wire cages. The site's entry gate will be littered with debris from its trucks, gravel, bits of concrete. A half block farther along will be a low-rise heritage building with hot yoga studios and interior design offices, and, taking up the length of its ground floor, Uovo Magico, its patio marked off by geranium-filled planters. I'm going to leap ahead a little bit to where after Marcel has been seated on the patio. As Marcel hooks his cane on the table edge, he'll see the foot cap is now separated almost all the way around, and will remind himself again to pick up a replacement. He'll unfold the menu, though he will already know what he wants. Something else might catch his eye. His favorite might have vanished. These things happen. The menu will emphasize egg dishes, mainly with contrived names. The Uovo Easy, the I Want to Take You Higher, and Marcel's usual. The Ovomancy, his usual server Larissa will ask, having quietly threaded her way through the other tables. Yes, thanks, and a Peroni. With a glass, Larissa will say, a statement, not a question. Yes, thanks, Marcel will answer, as if it were. She'll bring them on a cork-lined tray, condensation bright against the bottle's dark green. He'll watch her pour. Backlit by the sun, the beer will seem to generate an inner amber glow. She won't take away the second place setting or even ask. She'll know Marcel's standing ruse, a lunch companion running late, in case one of his more socially forceful coworkers passes and thinks to join him. These things happen. His first sip will have the savor a sunny day brings to beer, especially after a cane-slowed walk. He'll take a second sip and save the rest for his meal. This will be the best moment of his day so far. He'll bask in it. As he does, he'll hear the growl of an overpowered car from the street to his left. He'll turn to look with the Velt-born human sensitivity to growls. In this case, from Brett's bruised purple Corvette. The recent one that looks like someone tried to draw a Ferrari with an Etch-a-Sketch. Its windows will be down. It will stop 15 lateral feet from Marcel's table. Brett will glance over. Their eyes will meet. Brett's manscaped face will look mildly surprised, and he'll smile. Not a warm smile, a smile of, well, isn't this an interesting development? He'll notice the empty place setting. Jaget stood up, he'll call out. Marcel's stomach will sink. Hang tight, Brett will say. I'll leave it there.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so that is all 8 of our writers who were shortlisted for this anthology. So this was a contest, and there was a fee to enter. And part of the reason for that was so that we could provide a cash prize. So that is why we enlisted the help of a grand prize judge who took this short list of 8 stories and decided who's going to get that cash prize. And this year it came out to just over $300. So Yvonne Pelletier is our grand prize judge this year. She moved to the Grey Bruce area in Ontario, which is where Blank Spaces and Chicken House Press is located. After several years in academia, she came here. A specialist in transatlantic literature, she has taught poetry, the novel, creative writing, and film and literary theory at universities in the US and Canada. Yvonne has published articles and presented papers on a variety of topics, including travel narratives, culinary aesthetics, road trips, and confidence games. She received her PhD in English from the University of Toronto. Prior to that, she worked in advertising in Chicago and Toronto. She is the coordinating director of the Words Aloud Poetry Festival and is currently working as a marketing content writer, as well as an editor of both nonfiction and fiction. She is currently learning the art of beekeeping, always seeking to become more active in local arts and literary communities. Yvonne also serves on the boards of the West Grey Public Library and the Durham Art Gallery. She has always been an avid reader of every kind of fiction, both on the job and off, and is so delighted to participate as judge in the 2024 Fiction Anthology Contest. So Yvonne, if you're ready, I'm going to hand things over for you, and you can share your thoughts and let us know who the big winner is.
Okay, thank you, Alana. I should say that I really appreciate this opportunity to read such a wonderful selection of short stories. I know as someone who's worked in literature in various ways, it's a beleaguered field at the moment. Literacy's going down, publishing is getting harder, existing as a writer is becoming ever more challenging. So I truly appreciate Alana's efforts to keep literature at the forefront of our consciousness, and also this wonderful array of stories that I was given to read. I got to read just the top 8, so it was extremely difficult, and I was truly hard pressed to determine the winner. And just listening to everyone read them out loud again tonight just made me, every single word is like, well, maybe that, no, maybe that, no. But I stuck with my original plan. But you all brought your stories to life on top of everything else. So I kept my camera off simply because I didn't want anyone looking at my face while I was listening and, responding. I wanted to be truly neutral. Okay, so tonight I'm going to announce the 3rd and 2nd place honorable mentions, and they're not really 2nd and 3rd. They're both pretty much equally good, and then I will conclude with the grand prize winner. So the first honorable mention goes to Tara Ross, the author of Hatchling. In this story, a woman struggling with her family as told through the experience of dealing with baby turtles being hatched. I was struck by the balance struck between private subjective pain and the larger environment, layering the protagonist's experience through a series of externalized objects and activities from eating dinner to the crows stalking of the hatchlings. The narrative draws out the complicated feelings of a mother struggling to disentangle herself from that domestic identity in the face of a talk she must have with her husband. Thank you, Tara, so much for this wonderful and evocative story. And I really appreciated the opportunity to hear you read part of that aloud as well. Okay. Second honorable mention goes to Katrine Raymond for Keepsakes. I very much enjoyed Keepsakes for its creativity and its surprising twist, which I will not mention here. A twist that goes beyond plot and into the very heart of the protagonist's relationship with his dead mother, and indeed his sense of who he is. Jimmy's grief at this fundamental loss is gradually revealed through the memories evoked by his mother's notes, which she's left taped or tacked to almost everything. I was intrigued to learn that this is actually something that happened in reality as well. He makes a surprising discovery in the process, one that provokes profound subjective realignments. Thank you, Katrine. for such a thought-provoking and humorous consideration of grief, which is not usually a very funny topic. So, but it was the details were just marvelous. Okay, so I know I feel like I should be saying more, but I think we all just want to get to the winner, right? Okay, so drum roll, please. I will now announce the grand prize winner, which is Kevin Wilson for Ovomancy. Ovomancy, and I really hope I'm pronouncing this word right because I honestly learned it by reading the story, and I have never said it aloud. And I heard it aloud from you tonight for the first time. So Ovomancy is an innovative and challenging story that operates on multiple levels, far too many for me to articulate here. I especially appreciated the way the story expressed male wounding and the impact of toxic masculinity on identity as the protagonist Marcel tries to go to lunch alone and fails. That's a bit of an understatement, ultimately, I believe. The narrative itself is very delicately wrought and beautifully structured, with Marcel's neurosis brought to light through the sustained use of the prophetic image of an egg, which is deployed in a variety of subtle and symbolic ways. Finally, the story's conclusion intriguingly involves a very creative interaction between a stick and a stone. Kevin, thank you so much for this complex and well-wrought story, one that I will be thinking about for a while. And go ahead and spend your prize money all in one place. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
And
you.
I'd love to talk to all of you individually about your stories. It's so great to be able to meet the authors of the things I get to read, which is, as a 19th century specialist, I usually don't get the opportunity to do that. So thank you, Elaine.
Thank you, Yvonne. That's wonderful. I loved everything you said. That's so great. The thought that you took as you read these stories. I know you took this seriously, and I appreciate so much the time that you gave and the attention that you gave to these stories. And Kevin, congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Alana. Thank you to the jurors. And of course, thank you, Yvonne, for the final decision. I was delighted just to see my cheeky story make the final 8. I'm genuinely honored now that it's been selected out of such fine company. From what we've heard tonight, that honor could easily have gone to any one of the shortlisters.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be proud to appear alongside all your work in the anthology this spring. Thanks again.
Wonderful.
I am writing the foreword, right?
Yes, you are. I hope
And
so.
everyone will get further comments on their stories in that. And it's anywhere from 200 to 2,000 words or something. So we'll see how much I have to say about everyone. But I'm looking forward to writing that. Thank you.
Can't wait to read it. So congratulations to all 8 of you. You made it through the long list. You made it through the jury brought it down to you. And I think they made really wise choices. Something like this couldn't happen without the help of these volunteer supporters, because I certainly have my own tastes. And I know there were a few stories that I was ready to die on a hill for. And thankfully, most of them where the jury agreed with me. So there's always a fun tension, but that is why things like this have to go to a team of people. It can't be one person who's making that final decision, because that's just not fair. My personal preference is maybe not going to please the masses. So this way we get a nice variety and get a lot of different tastes mixed together, which is really exciting. So the approach that you all took to this theme of sticks and stones was so diverse and unique. And I do believe this is a collection that's going to please anyone, no matter what kind of genre they're into. There's going to be something in there for anyone. And that's what's really exciting about it. So pre-orders are officially open on the Chicken House Press website. I'll pop that link in the chat for anyone who wants to grab that. But if you are one of the contributors, don't place an order, because I have a special deal for you. You get a little something extra. So don't make your purchase yet, but direct your family and friends there. There's obviously time. We're not going to release until about mid-April. I don't have a definite date yet. It will be coming out in paperback and ebook versions. So yeah, that's exciting. This is the 4th collection that we're putting out, and it's always so fun to be able to share new voices to me, new voices to this community. So thank you so much for being part of this. I just want to thank each of you who took the time to be here tonight, taking time out of, we're all busy, I know, and it's a busy season. Thank you to everyone who showed up to celebrate these finalists. Before we go, I'll let you know that a new contest theme for this anthology series will be posted in June, and it will be opening for entries again July 1st, as long as I have all my ducks in a row. If you have a suggestion for a theme, if there's a story burning in you that you really want to play with, reach out and let me know, because I got nothing right now. So I'm always open to receiving those suggestions. And I love getting kind of that back and forth participation. That's really helpful. So that's all I got. Thanks again, everyone, for a great night. Congratulations, Kevin, all the finalists. I will be reaching out to you guys tomorrow with all the information about contributor copies and what the editing process is going to look like, how we're going to get this book into your hands and into the world. Kevin, I'm going to be connecting with you about getting you your money. So we'll talk tomorrow. I think that's it. Thank you for a wonderful night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.